Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about power. Not just about climbing the corporate ladder, but really thinking about power in terms of leadership and making things happen in your career.
Hmm.
And we got a really cool source to help us unpack all this.
Okay.
A LinkedIn article by executive coach Miguel Nogueral.
Okay. Yeah.
He's basically taken, these really interesting ideas from Jeffrey Pfeffer's book, Power, Why Some People Have It and Others Don't.
Right.
Combine that with, all of his experience as an executive coach.
Interesting.
So I'm actually kind of excited about this deep dive because I feel like we've got a lot of misconceptions around power.
Oh, for sure. I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, this article really does a good job of debunking a lot of those common myths, about power. It's not just about formal authority,
Right.
having a fancy title.
Mm-hmm.
It's about influence. And, it's about making things happen,
Yeah.
driving outcomes, shaping perception, and, getting people kind of on board and moving towards a shared vision,
Yeah.
which is really exciting.
Totally.
It means that anyone at any level can cultivate power
That's a really good point.
and use it
Yeah.
to make a difference.
So empowering. The article talks about building this foundation of personal power.
Right.
So what goes into that? What are the key elements?
Well, I mean, it starts with a real focus on skills,
Right.
your reputation,
Mm.
and then consistently delivering value. Think about it this way. What are you uniquely good at?
Right.
That also helps your organization succeed.
Oh, that's interesting. And that's where I think the strength audit idea comes in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because instead of just having this vague idea of oh, I'm good at this,
Right.
you actually write down your top 3 to 5 strengths
Right.
and how you've used them to have an impact. Have
Yeah.
you seen that be helpful for your clients?
I have. I mean, a lot of people just haven't taken the time to really articulate what they're good at in such a concrete way.
Mm.
And once they do, it's like this light bulb moment. They suddenly see themselves,
Yeah.
their contributions, in a totally new light.
Mm.
And from there, we can move on to what the article calls perception alignment.
Okay, perception alignment. Tell me more. What is that?
So it's kind of like strategically revealing your authentic self, making sure that others perceive you
Okay.
in a way that aligns with those strengths and your goals.
Yeah.
So we might do a little feedback exercise where clients get, input from trusted colleagues.
Oh, interesting.
And sometimes they discover hidden strengths they didn't even realize they had.
Oh, wow. I love that. So it's not just about knowing your strengths, it's about making sure other people see them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then there's this idea of the visibility plan. I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, ooh, self-promotion, that feels a little icky. But the way the article frames it is
Right.
much more authentic.
I mean, yeah, it's not about, bragging or being inauthentic.
Right.
It's about showcasing your skills,
Yes.
right, and your contributions in a way that benefits both you
Okay.
and the organization.
Yeah.
And so, volunteering for those high visibility projects, right?
Hmm.
Presenting your work confidently, networking strategically. These are all things that can amplify your impact.
That's great. And there's this great example in the article about a senior director at a manufacturing company.
Oh, yeah, she was really strong analytically, right?
Yeah, but wanted to move into a more strategic role.
That's right. So she actively sought out projects that were related to strategic planning.
Hmm.
Right. And she started networking with key decision makers. So she was really able to kind of demonstrate her broader capabilities.
Hmm.
It wasn't about changing who she was,
Right.
but showing a different facet of her expertise.
Hmm.
And ultimately, that led to a promotion
Hmm.
and a seat at the table where the big decisions were being made.
I love that example. She took those concrete steps
Yeah.
to shape how people saw her.
Right.
And it led to a real breakthrough.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about individual effort, right?
Yeah.
The article talks about the power of relationships too.
Absolutely. I mean,
Wow.
influence is practically impossible
Right.
without strong relationships.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's not just about having a great relationship with your boss,
Right.
right? True influence comes from building a diverse network
Hmm.
across different levels
Yeah.
and different departments.
Yeah, I love that. It's like building a web.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It spans your entire organization.
That's where the network audit comes in.
Yeah.
You literally map out all those key stakeholders in your world,
Right.
decision makers,
Influencers.
connectors,
Yeah.
those people who just seem to know everybody.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's so smart.
Uh,
I'm also, like, really intrigued by this idea of micro engagements. What's that about?
So this is a simple but powerful strategy.
Okay.
And the idea is to just spend maybe like 10 to 15 minutes each week
Okay.
connecting with colleagues
Oh, nice.
in a meaningful way.
Okay.
So it could be sharing an article,
Mm.
right? It could be expressing gratitude
Right.
or just checking in on a personal level.
Mm.
Simple things.
And that seems like something anybody can do, no
Yeah.
matter, like, how busy you are.
Absolutely.
There's this really good example in the article of a finance leader
Oh, yeah.
who just, like, was so good at building relationships.
He understood that information and influence flow through relationships.
Hmm.
And so, he really invested in those connections. And
Yeah.
he became the go-to person
Right.
for cross-functional collaboration.
It seems like he was like a master networker.
He was. He
Yeah.
really was.
But there's another piece of all this that I think can feel a little tricky.
Sure.
Perception management. I think that term often makes people, like, cringe.
Yeah.
But the article really emphasizes, like, it's not about being fake.
No, no, no. It's often misunderstood.
Mhm.
It's about aligning how others see you with your authentic self
Okay.
and your goals.
Hmm.
It's being strategic
Mm.
in how you present yourself
Okay.
and your work.
So it's more about, like, being mindful and intentional, not
Exactly.
like creating a false image.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there are some really, like, practical things you can do,
Yeah,
right,
that,
to manage perceptions.
absolutely.
Like, just being mindful of your communication style.
Yeah.
Like, are you clear in your emails?
Are you actively listening in meetings?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of those things matter.
That's a good point. And I also remember the article talking about, like, documenting your achievements.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that part of it too?
It is. It's not about bragging, but it's about making sure your contributions are recognized. Keep a running list and be prepared to share them in the right moments.
And I think one of the most powerful points the article makes is about, like, owning your mistakes.
Yes.
I think it's so tempting to, like, shy away from those,
Right.
but it's the opposite.
It is, because transparency and accountability
Mm.
are so crucial for building trust and credibility.
Yeah.
Right. And when something goes wrong, you got to address it head on.
Okay.
Take responsibility, outline a plan to fix it,
Yeah.
involve your team in the solution.
Mm.
And that approach can actually strengthen your reputation as a leader.
That's interesting.
It shows courage and it shows commitment.
And I love that example of the VP of operations who had that project failure.
Oh, right.
But instead of, like, blaming others, sweeping it under the rug,
Yeah.
she owned it,
She did.
communicated transparently,
Absolutely.
and it actually boosted her credibility. It seems like there's this theme emerging here.
Yeah.
Authenticity.
Yes.
It's key.
Absolutely.
Whether we're talking about, like, personal power or relationships
Right.
or perception management, it's all about being true to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
while also being, like, strategic.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot where authenticity meets strategy.
Oh, I love that.
Right. Where we can be ourselves, but also understand those dynamics of power and influence.
Well, this has been so insightful, but we're just getting started.
Right.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to be talking about the often dreaded topic of office politics.
Okay.
So we'll delve into how to, like, understand those power dynamics, navigate them strategically, use that knowledge to achieve your goals,
Right.
and make a real impact. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we get into all the ins and outs of office politics, I think it's important to remember that this isn't a sprint. It's a marathon.
Oh, that's a good point.
When we're talking about, building influence, building power, it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes consistent effort.
And a lot of resilience, too, I bet.
Absolutely. Resilience is key. When we talk about playing the long game, it's about having that, that mental and emotional strength to bounce back from the setbacks.
Right, because there are going to be setbacks.
There are always going to
Yeah.
be setbacks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's about being able to navigate the challenges and stay focused on those goals,
Yeah, even when it's tough.
even when it's tough.
Yeah.
And the article mentions some specific practices, for building resilience,
Right.
like journaling or mindfulness, or even working with a coach.
Right.
I think finding what works for you and making it a regular habit, that's what matters.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think, like, in your experience working with clients,
Sure.
which of those practices, are particularly helpful, like, in the workplace?
It really depends on the person and their specific needs. But I have to say, mindfulness practices, they're just so valuable,
Yeah.
especially in, today's always on work culture.
Right, where you're
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with messages and emails.
Right. Even just taking a few minutes each day to just breathe deeply,
Yeah.
focus on the present moment, quiet that mental chatter. It can make a huge difference in managing stress.
It's almost like hitting the pause button,
It is.
just for a little bit,
Absolutely.
reconnecting with yourself and then diving back in.
Exactly.
And the article also talks about, continuous learning
Yes,
as another important element of this, like, power marathon.
absolutely.
How do you, advise your clients to approach that? Continuous learning.
So the key is to be intentional and strategic.
Okay.
So think about, what are those skills and knowledge you need to achieve your goals?
Mm-hmm.
And then identify specific learning opportunities
Okay.
that align with those needs.
I-
It could be, taking a course, reading industry publications, attending conferences,
Yeah.
or even just having conversations with people outside of your usual circles.
That's a good point. I think it's so easy to get comfortable
It is.
and just think, oh, I've learned enough. But the truth is, there's always more to learn,
That is it.
especially in this crazy, fast-paced world we live in.
Absolutely.
For me, one of the biggest challenges is just staying on top of, all the new developments in my field.
Right.
How do you make it feel less overwhelming?
It doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. Even just, 30 minutes a day
Okay.
to read an article or listen to a podcast,
Right.
it makes a difference over time.
It adds up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The key is to make it a habit.
Okay.
Schedule it into your day,
Just like a meeting.
just like a meeting, and stick to it.
I love that. I'm a big fan of, actually scheduling things in my calendar.
Me too.
Otherwise, they don't happen.
Exactly.
The article also emphasizes seeking feedback,
Yes.
which I think it can be a little scary sometimes,
It can be.
but it sounds like we should be, actively seeking it out.
Think of feedback as a compass,
Right.
right? It helps you stay on course
Right.
and adjust your direction.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the most valuable feedback is the kind that, challenges us
Right.
to grow and see things differently, even if it's not, the easiest thing to hear.
Absolutely.
Any tips on, making that a little less scary?
Sure. Well, first of all, be specific
Okay.
about what you want feedback on.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of asking, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Try something more focused.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm working on improving my presentation skills.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me some feedback on how I did in that last team meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Be specific.
So the person giving you feedback knows exactly what to focus on.
Right. And it makes it more actionable for you.
That's a good point. What else?
And then also create a safe space for feedback. Let people know you genuinely value their honest opinions
Yeah.
and that you're open to hearing different perspectives.
Even if they're not positive.
Even if they're not positive. And remember, listen actively. Ask clarifying questions. Express gratitude for their insights.
And it seems like this ties back to the idea of balanced advocacy.
It does.
That we talked about earlier. It's like being assertive in asking for the feedback,
Yeah.
but also being open to what you hear.
Exactly.
And remembering that feedback, even when it's tough, is a gift.
It is.
It's an opportunity to grow.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far.
We have.
Personal power, strategic relationships, perception management, the importance of resilience, continuous learning, seeking out feedback. It's a lot.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah, it feels very interconnected.
It is. All of these things are pieces of the puzzle when it comes to understanding and wielding power effectively.
They work together to create this, foundation
You do.
for leadership and for impact.
Absolutely.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we are going to be tackling office politics. I'm a little apprehensive, I'm not going to lie,
Sure.
but also excited to
Oh,
hear your insights on how to navigate that world.
All right, we'll unpack that.
All right, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive into power and influence. And I gotta say, I'm actually feeling a little bit more, I don't know, maybe confident about tackling this office politics thing than I was at the beginning.
Well, that's good. It's totally understandable to, to feel some apprehension when it comes to office politics. But I think if we can reframe it a little bit, We can actually approach it in a way that feels, more authentic
Yeah,
and less like we're compromising our values or anything.
exactly. That's what I was hoping we could get into because the article actually suggests that like avoiding office politics altogether
Right.
can actually hurt your career,
Yeah.
which was kind of an aha for me.
It makes sense, though, when you think about it. Politics, at its core, is really just about understanding those power dynamics
Mm.
that are at play in any organization.
Mm-hmm.
And those dynamics influence everything
Right.
from how decisions are made
Yeah.
to, how resources are allocated to even, career advancement.
So it's not necessarily like about backstabbing and,
Right. It's not about being manipulative.
yeah.
It's about, being aware
Mm-hmm.
of who holds influence,
Yeah.
how decisions are made,
Mm.
and how to navigate those systems effectively.
And the article even uses this analogy of like being a detective,
Oh, yeah.
observing patterns.
Figuring out who are those key players.
Yeah.
How do they operate? What are their motivations?
Right. But then, like, once you've done that detective work,
Right.
you understand the landscape. How do you actually use that knowledge to your advantage?
Well, I think it goes back to this idea of, balanced advocacy that
Mm.
we talked about earlier.
Mm.
It's about being assertive and pursuing your goals,
Yeah.
advocating for your ideas,
Right.
but also being genuinely curious
Hmm.
about other people's perspectives and motivations.
But I remember that example from the article about the divisional leader.
Yeah, he was so direct.
Yeah, who was like so direct in his communication style.
Yeah, but he realized
Yeah.
that, understanding other people's motivations and concerns wasn't about being manipulative.
Hmm.
It was about being effective.
Yeah.
And, he learned to balance that directness with active listening.
Right.
And it really changed the game for him.
And it made him more effective.
Absolutely.
So it's not about being a pushover, but it's also not about like steamrolling over people.
Right, exactly.
It's somewhere in the middle.
It's that sweet spot.
Yeah.
It's understanding the nuance,
Hmm.
using that knowledge to, to navigate these systems
Yeah.
effectively, ethically.
I feel like this whole conversation about power and influence has just been so eye-opening,
Good. I'm glad.
It's made me realize that power isn't this like mysterious force
Right.
that only a select few people have. It's
Right.
something that we can all learn about, cultivate,
Absolutely.
and use to make a difference.
And the most effective use of power comes from that place of, authenticity and integrity.
Yeah,
Aligning your actions with your values,
right.
using your influence to create positive change.
I think that's such a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Like if there's one thing I'm walking away with from this whole deep dive,
Hmm.
it's that, power, when it's used ethically and strategically, can be such a force for good.
It can be. Absolutely.
It's about like empowering ourselves and others to achieve amazing things.
Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into power and influence.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, we hope you found this exploration as insightful as we did. And remember, no matter where you are in your career, you have the power to, you have the potential to step into your power.
You do.
And make a real impact. So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making your mark on the world.